I'm Jill. I've worked in the children's charity sector for around 30 years, and I'm currently the Volunteering Development Manager at Rachel House, which is one of 2 children's hospices provided by CHAS. Like many organisations, we stood down all of our volunteers at the beginning of lockdown. We've got about 850 volunteers doing a variety of roles across Scotland. As you can imagine, caring for a child with a life-limiting illness puts all of our families in the most vulnerable category. Therefore, we had to adapt very quickly to meet their needs, and we did this by creating the first ever virtual hospice. Many of our families had already began shielding before the official government advice. So with the exception of direct medical and nursing care, we transferred much of our daily work online. Things like art therapy, music therapy, bereavement support sessions, money advice sessions, as well as sort of social quizzes and get-togethers for families. So slide 3, this is just a little kind of overview of some of the services that we have offered. We trained volunteers up to offer a telephone friendship service to parents and carers, and we also, excuse me a second, we also developed letter writing and story telling service to the children. And for some children, that was the first time they'd ever received anything in the post that was just for them, which, as you can imagine, caused great excitement, especially as we always include sheets of stickers in each envelope. I mean, who doesn't love getting stickers? Our volunteers, who had previously supported families in their own homes with practical tasks and with sibling support, then transferred to offering emotional support to their families using Zoom, using Skype or WhatsApp, and that eased the family's sense of isolation. The children have enjoyed receiving activity packs through the post, as well as catching up with their volunteers on screen too. And I think what I would say is the virtual hospice has already enabled us to reach more families than ever, especially those in rural areas who are not able to access the hospice facilities. And we're already committed to continuing some of our new initiatives post-COVID. On slide 4, this is just a selection of helpline logos that I particularly use. So my background is mainly in telephone helplines. Predominantly, I worked with Childline and Parentline, although I've also undertaken work on the old BBC audience lines and have staffed telephone helplines for various newspapers when they've been running specifically sensitive campaigns. So these are the kind of ones, my go-to helpline resources, and I guess you'll all be familiar with the ones that are more relevant in your line of work. But I think I just want to say, you know, out of our support and telephone helplines can really be a lifeline for many of the families that we work with. So the reason I'm here speaking to you today is I attended a session about digital youth work, and I was in a conversation with Hilary, and I mentioned that unlike many of my colleagues, I actually was finding the adjustment to working virtually relatively easy. I've not been in my office now for 5 months, and I've kind of think I've related some of that back to my helpline experience. I wondered if it might be because my senses were heightened in the absence of body language, which really makes you tune in very closely, not only to what the person is saying, but also what they're not saying. I've always worked in a person-centred way, and I use a basic counselling skills approach, which I have been putting to particular good use recently. Over the years, young people and many adults have moved from using the phone to online services, which is reflected in a huge increase in email contact and one-to-one chats across most helplines. In slide 5, I've just given you a little selection about listening quotes. I'm a big fan of quotes, but the one that resonates most with me from the slide is the last one. You cannot truly listen to someone when you're thinking of how to reply. And for me, this sums up active listening in a nutshell. I try to remember this when someone is in the middle of telling me something and my mind's trying to jump ahead with what I want to say. I know it's not easy to be fully present in the hustle and bustle of life, but it really does make such a difference to the person who feels really listened to. So staying on the theme of basic counselling skills, I thought it might be useful just to think about some questions in the way of a little refresher. I know you will be familiar with some of them, if not all of them, and you probably incorporate these in your working day without even thinking about it. But let's have a look at slide 6, because it's good to reflect on a practice from time to time. So ask yourself, are you being your genuine self? Do you actively listen to what someone has to say without interrupting? It's not easy to do. Do you reflect back what you've heard them say? Reflection is a fabulous tool. It clarifies that you've heard what they've said correctly, but it also demonstrates acceptance to the person, that you're not judging them and you've reflected it back in a calm way. Always try to use empathy over sympathy. Sympathy is rarely helpful. Oh my God, that's awful. It can actually make the person feel worse. Try to walk alongside them. You know, it sounds like you're having a difficult time. I can hear that's really tough for you. And ask yourself, are you asking open questions? If you get yes and no to an answer, to questions, I would suggest you're perhaps phrasing it wrongly. So try and turn the question around. Instead of saying, do you like playing football outside? Say, what do you like to do when you're outside? So make them answer more than yes or no or I don't know. And have you allowed that person enough time to respond? And the tricky thing is sitting with silence. Sometimes on the phone, 5-second silence can feel like 30 seconds, but actually it's really important, and especially staying with people describing feelings that are difficult for them. Don't just move it on too fast. It might have been really hard for them to say what they've just said to you. So it's okay to sit with silence, and silence can be very powerful, and it can actually help people say a wee bit more than they maybe intended to in the first place. So thinking of that, especially working with young people, we know it can be challenging getting young people to talk about their feelings. If you ask them directly how they're feeling, many will respond and say, oh, I'm fine. When we used to debrief volunteers at Childline after each shift, they were not allowed to use the F word to describe their feelings, as fine gives you nothing to work with, and it can be used as a means of avoidance. One of the more common acronyms for fine is frustrated, or the other F word, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So it can sometimes help to be a bit less direct and open up a general conversation about feelings. So take COVID, for example. You could reflect that it has knocked us all out of our routines, which brings out different emotions for different people. You could ask the young person to invent their own scale from 1 to 10, for example, from okay, so-so, pretty wobbly, to mega stressed. They can use emojis or symbols or choice depending on the age of the child. So if a young person tells you they're mega stressed, then you've got something to work with. So when you have a minute, think about how you would adapt or frame a question about feelings to get a more detailed response. So slide 7 is just an image of two people talking. One's talking and one's listening. I had intended to do a short exercise with you that demonstrates good listening skills, and I thought it would also be a good way to introduce each other. But I was unsure how many people were going to join us, so I'm just going to give you the gist of the exercise instead. Again, it's maybe something you've done or something similar, or you could amend it to work, particularly with groups of young people. So what you would normally do is put somebody either in pairs or small groups, and you get one person to talk about themselves non-stop for 2 minutes. And it has to be something that they're comfortable sharing with the larger group. The listener has to listen for the 2 minutes without interrupting. And the talker's encouraged to fill the full 2 minutes. And that can be quite difficult for some people if they lack in confidence, but you can encourage them to talk about something that they like. I listened to a 2-minute conversation about Xbox recently. So it's whatever the young person feels confident in. And then you want to ask them, how difficult was it to talk about themselves for 2 minutes? And also, how difficult was it just to listen and not to interrupt? I know myself, you feel you want to jump in. And then what you would do is ask the listener to introduce their partner to you or the rest of the group. So we know that some people might struggle to talk about themselves, but we also know that others love nothing more than to do just that. I'm sure we've all got that friend or person in our lives who loves nothing more than to talk at you. Much of the time we brush it off, but sometimes it actually does get in the way. For example, I'm struggling and I say to my friend, I'm really worried about how I'm going to manage going back to work full time, getting the kids ready for school, and shopping for mum and dad since Jenny moved away. My friend replies, oh, for goodness sake, you'll cope. You always do. You're so organised. I'm being asked to take on more and more at work. Jim's had to take over meal times. You can imagine he's not too happy about that. And Susie's really playing up. It's impossible to get her into a routine at bedtime. Oh, I'm so exhausted with it all. I just don't have any time for me. So what happens there is my friend completely takes over and makes the conversation about her. This causes me to completely shut down as I don't feel listened to. And I end up even thinking, gosh, maybe she does have more to worry about than me. What I really want is the friend that says, that sounds like you're having a really tough time. I can hear how worried you are about it. Come on, let's grab a coffee and you can tell me more about it. This slide 9, this is the volunteering team that I work from. That's some of my colleagues. And our team at Chas consists of 9 of us spread across Kinross, Aberdeen, Balloch and Glasgow. So in the past, anytime we would meet up, we packed as many meetings as we could into one day. It was pretty full on. We usually had a working lunch. I would describe us basically as nice people. So relationships were all very pleasant, but perhaps quite surface level. So since lockdown, we set up a weekly coffee break where the focus was not on work, but just supporting each other during these unusual times. 5 of the team were furloughed and they could join if they, we could all just dip in and out as we wanted, but most people joined every week. And I think the outcome is we now have a much closer and a much more supportive team. We've shared our ups and downs, our highs and lows. We know about each other's values, and we've also been sharing our hobbies and sending little cards and little things to each other, which has been really quite sweet. We're all keen for this to continue, and it will be interesting to see if we do sustain this when some of us return to the offices, although for Chas, I don't think that's going to be any time soon, because especially as quite a few of us work out of the hospices. So on to slide 10. This is a lovely wee card that I bought recently called A Wee Hug. In recent Zoom calls with other Chas colleagues who consisted mainly of the nursing team and some of our support workers, they reflected on some of the challenges that they have of working virtually. And one issue arose for many of them that they struggled when a parent was upset that they weren't able to give them a hug. And I guess I struggled with this, as did one of our male nurses, because sometimes I think a hug is more for us, especially if we don't know what to say, and it can actually shut the person down from expressing their feelings. And I remember not so long ago at a friend's funeral, I sat behind her husband and he told me what fun they had had the night before she died. She died very suddenly. The night before she died, they'd been out with friends and they'd had such a lovely time. He was clearly very distressed, but he wanted to tell the story, and I sat quietly and closely beside him while he did that. However, another friend of, of ours was standing behind me, and she just couldn't cope with that. And she actually came between us and offered him a kind of babbling hug. And it immediately stopped him in his tracks, and the moment was lost. And I know there's people who love to hug and those who don't. I'm missing hugging loved ones too, but it's mindful just to think who it's for. Remember, we don't have to fill the gaps, as I said earlier, and some people really struggle with silence. And especially when somebody's upset, it's a natural reaction to want to reach out to them. But it can be very powerful, and it allows people time to process sometimes some of the feelings or questions that you've just asked them. And that's particularly when they're sharing really difficult feelings. I've got another friend who's a couples counsellor, and like many of us, has had to adapt really quickly to seeing her clients over Zoom. And she described seeing her clients this way as a very intimate experience, and she actually described it as truly face-to-face. She told me one of her clients also remarked that she actually felt quite exposed on the Zoom call because of the direct eye-to-eye contact and the lack of distractions that might be more obvious when you're sitting in a large room. So in order to participate, the client has to make sure, the counsellor has to make sure that the client feels really comfortable and safe. And just another question for you to ponder when you have a minute. What would you do in your practice to enable someone to feel comfortable and safe online? My sister's a pupil sport worker in a school in Dundee, and she had been offering initial contacts using audio only for the young people and working up to audio and visual contact if they felt okay about it. At the same school, some of her teaching colleagues were quite disheartened about the lack of online engagement during lockdown, despite many young people having their phones glued to their hands, and many adults too, I would add. However, one department seemed to crack it by offering a 1-hour drop-in session. So these had a much more informal structure, and the teaching staff facilitated a kind of question and answer session, as well as supporting the young people. And another young teacher friend of mine talked about the success and failures of some of her colleagues in what would be termed as a high-performing school. There was no surprise that the teachers who literally just sent the young people a PowerPoint presentation didn't fare too well in their feedback, whereas those who uploaded videos that were engaging, that were fun and supportive really aided learning. I mean, who would have known? I haven't used it myself, but friends and colleagues working with young people have had a really positive experience of using the online game-based learning platform Kahoot, and that's Kahoot with a K. That was designed for social learning around a common screen. I believe the quizzes and some of the more social things are really popular, and I'm sure many of you have been using it already. So on to slide 11, I thought it would be really good to finish with a mindful moment. The last few months have brought challenges we could never have imagined, and we have had to adapt very quickly into a new way of living as well as a new way of working. So I thought I would use the last 10 minutes to have a mindful moment to try and unscramble our brains even for a short time. I'm going to use an excerpt from Buddha's Book of Sleep by Joseph Emmett. Now, I do not practice meditation myself, but I have completed a course in mindfulness, and I think the relaxation exercise I'm going to read probably straddles the two. Some people think the purpose of meditation and mindfulness is to stop the mind. They sit and they try, and they soon get into a fight with their mind, a fight that they lose. And believe me, I have tried, and I know I get frustrated and I give up. You might recognise yourself in that scenario. So if we look at calming the mind, that's maybe a more appropriate goal, and it's a good way of doing that is by paying attention to your breathing. So are you up for giving it a try? Good. Well, let's make ourselves as comfortable as we can, just while we're sitting, and you can close your eyes. You don't need to be near the camera. You can turn the camera off if you want. And what we're going to do is concentrate on our breath just now. And by concentrating on our breath, we're offering the mind something other than our thoughts to chew on. And it works better than fighting to slow it down. So I've even got my little candle here, so hopefully I won't fall asleep. So let's give it a go. The past has already gone, and the future is yet to come. I am concentrating on being peaceful, happy, and free in this present moment. Now I'm concentrating on being aware of each breath. My attention on the breath is continuous. I follow the breath as it begins, and my abdomen starts to expand. I continue to pay attention as my abdomen rises and falls with each breath. Like a child going high and low on a swing. Like a swing, my breath slows down at each end. I follow it all the way as it slows down and starts again. I embrace my breath with all my care and attention. Like a mother holds her baby, I do not drop the baby. Thoughts stay in the background. I enjoy the rhythmic rise and fall of my abdomen. I enjoy staying in the here and now. I have stopped running backwards and forwards. My mind keeps producing thoughts. That is its nature. I do not follow the thoughts. I concentrate on my breath. I am comfortable and at ease. With each breath, I let go of tension somewhere in my body and mind. I am aware that thoughts can bring tension to my face. With each breath, I relax my face muscles and smile. There are sensations in my body. I accept them. I am aware of my posture. I am aware of the rush of air around my nostrils as I breathe in. If there are sounds, I do not react to them. I just notice them and let them go. I continue to enjoy my breathing peacefully. A river of feelings and thoughts is flowing, but I'm not drowning in it. The concentration on the breath is like the anchor that prevents the boat from drifting. Focusing on my breath keeps me from getting lost in thought. I notice sounds and skin sensations without reacting to them. I smile at disturbances such as memories, little itches and noises. Smiling relaxes me. I feel content. With each breath, I arrive in the here and now. I am sitting upright, breathing comfortably. My mind is peaceful, my body free of tension. I am calm and rested. I feel free. I feel at home. So just when you're ready, if you could open your eyes, and if you need to adjust your camera to come back, that's great. So I'm wondering if you were able to be fully present when I was talking there. Did you get interrupted? Did a message come through on your phone that you wanted to check? Or where did your mind wander off to? All of these things are perfectly normal. It's really difficult to train our mind to be solely in the present, and it does take a lot of practice. And what I would say is there's nothing wrong with wandering off and being out of sync. The trick is to recognise that you're out of sync and get back in. And it's when we don't realise that problems arise. So I just want to finish with slide 12, and that's Keep the Joy Alive. And that's Chaz's campaign slogan. And it's actually a nice positive way to end the session. I really appreciate you all taking time out to join me today, and I hope you have found something useful to take away. I think it's really important now more than ever to take proper breaks away from screen. If you're lucky enough to have a little office space in your home, make it as nice as you can. I've got my scented candle here. I bought myself a new pot plant. Do what you can to make it cheerful, because I actually think the winter months ahead are going to be really challenging for a lot of folk. You know, when it's dark in the morning, it's dark at night, and you haven't left your house. So remember, take proper breaks away and be kind to yourself, because you deserve it. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to Hilary for helping me with my presentation.